They don't change when you cry. They don't change when you beg. They change when you leave and never look back. Because the moment a narcissist realizes they've lost someone who truly loved them, something breaks. Not their heart, but their illusion of control. If you've ever wondered why they suddenly resurface, spiral, rewrite the past, or act like a completely different person after you're gone, stay with me. What I'm about to explain isn't emotional, it's psychological. And once you understand it, you'll stop waiting for an apology that will never come. The moment a narcissist realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them, what occurs is not heartbreak in the traditional sense, but a psychological injury to their identity. This is known as narcissistic injury, and it strikes at the core of how they regulate their self-worth. A narcissist does not experience love as mutual emotional connection. They experience it as validation, admiration, and control. When a person who provided consistent emotional affirmation, loyalty, and tolerance leaves, the narcissist is suddenly deprived of the external source that stabilized their fragile sense of self. This loss feels less like grief and more like an existential threat. Their internal narrative of superiority, entitlement, and desirability is disrupted, and they are forced to confront a version of themselves they spend their entire lives avoiding. This realization often happens suddenly. It is not gradual insight, but a sharp rupture. They notice the silence, the lack of response, the absence of emotional supply, and it produces panic rather than reflection. Without someone reflecting their importance back to them, their internal emptiness becomes louder. The narcissist may cycle rapidly between disbelief and entitlement, convincing themselves the other person will return, while simultaneously feeling outraged that they dared to leave. This contradiction creates emotional instability, irritability, and an urgent need to regain control. What makes this moment especially destabilizing is that the person who left often represented unconditional emotional investment. That type of love functioned as a buffer against shame, insecurity, and self-doubt. When it disappears, unresolved feelings of inadequacy surface, even if only briefly. However, instead of processing these emotions in a healthy way, the narcissist externalizes the pain. They blame, devalue, or rewrite history to restore psychological balance. The injury is never fully integrated or healed, it is defended against. This is why the narcissist's behavior after the loss often appears dramatic, reactive, or chaotic. The loss does not lead to growth. It triggers a desperate attempt to reassert control and protect a fragile self-image that can no longer be maintained through the presence of someone who genuinely loved them. If this is resonating with you, pause for a moment and subscribe. This channel is about clarity, so you stop blaming yourself for someone else's emotional immaturity. A narcissist does not miss people in the way emotionally healthy individuals do. When they realize they have lost someone who truly loved them, what they experience is not longing for connection, but distress over the loss of function. That person played a psychological role. They provided validation, admiration, emotional regulation, and a sense of stability that the narcissist could not generate internally. Love in this dynamic was never about mutuality. It was about utility. When the person leaves, the narcissist is forced to confront the sudden absence of what kept their inner world organized. This is why their reaction often feels confusing or even cruel. They may reach out suddenly, appear nostalgic, or claim regret, but these behaviors are driven by deprivation, not attachment. What they are responding to is the disruption of their emotional supply. The person who truly loved them tolerated inconsistency, excused harmful behavior, and continued offering reassurance even when it was not earned. That tolerance created comfort and control. Losing it feels destabilizing, not because of emotional loss, but because the narcissist must now manage their insecurity alone. This distinction explains why narcissists often replace people quickly. They are not moving on emotionally, they are restoring a function. Another person becomes a new source of admiration, attention, or regulation. The speed of replacement can feel deeply invalidating to the person who left, but it reveals the truth of the attachment. The narcissist is not seeking connection, they are seeking equilibrium. When they say they miss you, what they often mean is that life feels harder without you absorbing their emotional volatility. You were a container for their anxiety, their anger, and their need for affirmation. Without that container, their internal discomfort intensifies. They may idealize the role you played while still devaluing you as a person. This contradiction allows them to grieve the function without acknowledging the humanity of the one who provided it. Understanding this difference is painful, but it is also liberating. It clarifies that the love you offered was real, but the love you received was conditional. The narcissist does not mourn the loss of you. They mourn the loss of what you did for them. When a narcissist realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them, the internal shift from power to panic happens quickly and often invisibly. Control is the cornerstone of their psychological safety. As long as they can predict, influence, or dominate another person's emotional responses, they feel regulated and secure. The presence of someone deeply invested in them creates a sense of superiority and entitlement. Losing that person is not just a relational loss, it is a collapse of perceived dominance. What replaces it is panic, even if it is masked by arrogance or indifference. This panic emerges because the narcissist no longer controls the narrative, the access, or the emotional availability of the other person. The sudden inability to reach, provoke, or extract a response triggers anxiety and agitation. Silence becomes threatening. Boundaries feel like rejection. The narcissist may experience an urgent need to reassert control, not to reconnect emotionally, but to restore their sense of power. This is why behaviors often escalate after the loss. They may bombard with messages, create crises, or attempt to provoke jealousy or guilt. These actions are not expressions of love. They are attempts to reestablish dominance. Internally, this loss destabilizes their emotional regulation. Narcissists rely heavily on external sources to manage feelings of worth and significance. Without someone who consistently responded, accommodated, or reassured them, they are left alone with unresolved insecurity. This internal discomfort is intolerable, so it must be discharged outward. Anger, blame, and contempt become tools to manage panic. By positioning the other person as cruel, disloyal, or ungrateful, the narcissist temporarily restores a sense of control over the narrative. At the same time, they may oscillate between entitlement and desperation. One moment they believe the person will return because they always do. The next, they feel humiliated by the idea that they were left. This emotional volatility is not growth, it is destabilization. The loss exposes how dependent their sense of power was on someone else's availability. When control disappears, panic takes its place, revealing a fragile structure that could only stand as long as someone remained close enough to be controlled. After a narcissist realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them, One of the most immediate psychological shifts is the rewriting of history. This is not deliberate lying in the traditional sense, but a defensive reconstruction of reality designed to protect their self-image. The loss creates a threat to their belief that they are admirable, desirable, and justified in their behavior. Accepting that someone left because of their actions would require accountability, and accountability triggers shame. To avoid that emotional exposure, the narcissist alters the narrative. In this rewritten version of events, the relationship was never that meaningful. The other person was unstable, needy, disloyal, or flawed. The love they received is minimized or dismissed, even if it was once relied upon heavily. By reframing the past, the narcissist preserves a sense of superiority and innocence. This allows them to position themselves as the victim rather than the one who caused harm. The story becomes not, I lost someone who loved me, but I escaped someone who didn't deserve me. This narrative shift serves multiple psychological purposes. It reduces internal discomfort, restores a sense of control, and justifies future behavior. If the other person is labeled as problematic, then the narcissist's actions no longer require reflection. The rewriting also makes it easier to seek new supply, because the narcissist can present themselves as misunderstood or mistreated rather than emotionally unavailable or exploitative. For the person who truly loved them, this process is deeply destabilizing. They may feel erased, invalidated, or confused by how quickly the story changes. Moments of intimacy are denied. Promises are reframed as manipulation. Harmful behaviors are rationalized or denied entirely. This can lead the former partner to question their own memory and reality. What is important to understand is that this rewriting is not about you. It is a survival strategy. The narcissist cannot hold both the truth of being loved and the truth of losing control. So they choose the story that protects their ego. In doing so, they sacrifice truth, connection, and accountability to maintain a fragile sense of self that cannot tolerate being seen clearly. When a narcissist realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them, what often follows is behavior that looks like change, but is actually an attempt to regain control. This is commonly mistaken for growth, remorse, or self-awareness, but it is better understood as hoovering. Hoovering is not about repair or accountability. It is about pulling the person back into the dynamic so the narcissist can restore emotional supply and power. The timing is important. These behaviors usually appear only after the person has fully disengaged, set boundaries, or stopped responding. The narcissist is reacting to loss, not reflecting on harm. Hoovering can take many forms. Apologies may suddenly appear, but they are vague and centered on outcomes rather than actions. There may be declarations of insight, promises of therapy, or claims of transformation. These statements are often emotionally compelling because they mirror exactly what the person once asked for. However, they lack consistency, specificity, and sustained effort. The focus remains on getting access back, not on understanding the impact of their behavior. If the person resists or asks for accountability, the tone often shifts quickly to anger, guilt, or withdrawal. Genuine change, by contrast, is slow, uncomfortable, and not performative. It does not require an audience or immediate reconciliation. It involves taking responsibility without minimizing, deflecting, or blaming. It includes tolerating shame, sitting with discomfort, and accepting that the other person may never return. Narcissistic patterns are built on avoiding these very experiences, which is why true change is rare. The narcissist may intellectually understand what they lost, but emotional integration requires humility, something their structure resists. What makes this stage especially confusing is that hoovering can feel sincere. The narcissist may appear emotionally vulnerable, nostalgic, or even self-critical, but vulnerability without accountability is not growth. Insight without behavior change is not healing. When access is restored, the old patterns almost always return because the underlying dynamics were never addressed. Understanding the difference between hoovering and genuine change protects you from re-entering a cycle that looks different on the surface but remains the same underneath. Change is proven over time without pressure and without the demand that you sacrifice your boundaries to make them feel whole again. When a narcissist realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them, their response typically falls into one of three patterns: rage, victimhood, or collapse. These reactions are not conscious choices, but defensive adaptations designed to protect a fragile self-image from overwhelming shame. The loss confronts them with a reality they cannot easily integrate, that someone saw them clearly and still chose to leave. This threatens their sense of superiority and control, and the psyche moves quickly to defend itself. Rage is often the most visible response. The narcissist may become hostile, aggressive, or cruel, either directly or indirectly. This anger is not about the person who left, but about the injury to their ego. Rage restores a sense of power. By attacking, devaluing, or punishing the other person, the narcissist discharges internal discomfort and reasserts dominance. The message becomes, "You are bad," rather than, "I was hurt." This protects them from vulnerability and keeps shame at a distance. Victimhood is a quieter but equally powerful reaction. Here, the narcissist reframes the loss as betrayal or abandonment. They position themselves as misunderstood, mistreated, or sacrificed. This allows them to receive sympathy and validation from others while avoiding accountability. In this narrative, they are not someone who lost a loving partner due to their behavior, but someone who was wronged by an ungrateful or unstable person. Victimhood preserves self-worth without requiring self-reflection. Collapse is less common but deeply destabilizing. When neither rage nor victimhood fully restores equilibrium, the narcissist may experience depression, emptiness, or a loss of functioning. This can look like withdrawal, substance use, reckless behavior, or emotional numbness. The absence of the person who regulated them exposes how dependent they were on external validation. Without it, their internal structure weakens. Even in collapse, however, insight is fleeting. The pain is felt, but not integrated. These responses can cycle rapidly. A narcissist may move from rage to victimhood to collapse and back again, depending on what temporarily reduces discomfort. None of these states represent healing. They are attempts to escape the emotional reality of loss without facing responsibility. Understanding this pattern helps explain why their behavior after the loss can feel extreme, confusing, or contradictory. It is not transformation. It is psychological survival in the face of an identity threat they were never equipped to face. When a narcissist realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them, many people hope that closure will finally come through an apology, an explanation, or a moment of accountability. This expectation is understandable, but it is also where a great deal of